Hello, and welcome to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. This episode, Loz and I return to the Young Kingdoms to catch up on Elric's plunge into the watery depths at the hands of his jealous cousin and competitor for the Ruby Throne, Yerkun. We'll be looking at Book 2 of Elric of Melniboné as Moorcock continues his habit of very helpfully splitting his early novels into parts, making his books easily digestible in podcast-sized chunks. Moorcock has talked about this habit, part of his formula for writing novels, in a few articles over the years, and it shakes out a little bit like this. The idea is that you spend a couple of days setting things up before you write, and during this time you establish a few things. Number one, you establish a plot. Model it on The Maltese Falcon or The Grail Quest. People are seeking something important. In modern screenwriting parlance, we'd probably call that a MacGuffin. A fallible, reluctant hero who gets dragged into a conflict with supernatural powers. A list of things you'll use. A key event to take place every 4 pages. A list of coherent images, for example, a shrieking sentient sword, or a tower that phases in and out of reality. A rough structure, if not an actual plot. A list of fantastic images, for example, a city of screaming statues. A time frame. Will the story unfold over years, or is it 6 days to save the world? And finally, go into lockdown. No phones, no internet, no visitors. And then you write, beginning with a mystery that you'll reveal bit by bit and deepen it as you go. Aim for 60,000 words. Divide into 4 sections, roughly 15,000 words apiece. Although we have found, from doing some of his early novels, that he tends to divide them into 3. But anyway. Then divide each into 6 chapters and keep chapters at 2,500 words maximum. He suggests using the Lester Dent master plot formula. Now, of course, you can look this up, but in summary, you must never have a revelation of something that wasn't already established. So, you can't unmask a murderer who wasn't a character established already. All your main characters have to be in the first part. All your main themes and everything else has to be established in the first part, developed in the second and third, and resolved in the last. And there's always a sidekick to make the responses the hero isn't allowed to make, to get frightened, to add a lighter note, to offset the hero's morbid speeches, and so on. The hero has to supply the narrative dynamic, and therefore can't have any common sense. Any one of us, in those circumstances, would say, "What? Dragons? Demons? You've got to be joking." So the hero has to be driven, and when people are driven, common sense disappears. You don't want your reader to make common sense objections, you want them to go with the drive. But you've got to have somebody around who'll act as a sort of chorus. When in doubt, descend into a minor character. So, when you reach an impasse, and you can't move the action any further with your major character, switch to a minor character's viewpoint, which will allow you to keep the narrative moving, and give you some time to brew something. So, it all sounds so simple from Michael Moorcock's perspective, but it worked for him and he did write novels in little more than 3 days. So on this episode of Breakfast in the Ruins, we're looking at that middle chunk of Elric of Melniboné. And I'm reflecting on the fact that the amount of time I spend preparing, recording, supping beverages with Loz as we chew the fat, editing, mixing and then uploading will in truth probably not be a whole lot less than Moorcock spent actually writing it. And that's incredible. And for someone like me that always daydreamed of being a genre writer and a creator of fantastic worlds, but lacked the talent, application and inspiration to do so, it's just quite awe-inspiring. Anyway, enough of me, let's get down to business. Derry and Tom's awaits, and I understand Loz has booked us a table. I'll see you up there. And here we are back in Derry and Tom's roof garden, and I'm joined once again by Loz. Hello, Loz.
Hello.
How are you?
Alan.
Hello, Alan.
Hello. Yes, I'm very good.
Excellent.
On this Friday night.
Yeah, and as it's Friday night, we've already kicked off a little bit with some of our libations. We started with, what did we start with? Cloudwater Brewing Company, Soft and Hazy Pale Ale, which wasn't too bad. Our pale ale is a beer for everyone, everyday moments.
Like really. Now.
Conversation with friends.
Ideal.
Or quiet relaxation after work, and aims to provide a balance between new wave hops, yeast esters.
I like a good yeast-based ester. I don't know about
no
you.
fucking idea what that means.
No idea.
And easy drinkability. It's full of ripe tropical fruit flavours that linger over a finish that's soft, juicy, and low on bitterness to leave your taste buds satisfied but your palate fresh.
Or another way of reviewing it is, it tastes a bit like Brewdog.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was all right.
No, it was
like
nice.
Brewdog, but less problematic.
Yeah. Sort of a politically correct Brewdog, if you will. Yeah.
Aroma and flavour, mango, pineapple and tangerine, with a light, lasting malt character. Body, light to medium body with spritzy carbonation. Aftertaste, soft and juicy orange, low bitterness.
I think that's one of the problems with the craft beer movement. Is
What, how fucking pretentious
They
it
do
is.
procrastinate, don't they? At least with it, you get a decent wine, you can't read it because it's in some kind of foreign language.
Yeah, whereas they've gone full Julie Gould.
Yeah, is it got a food kind of match on it?
No, thank goodness. I wouldn't have bought it if it had.
Cool blue Doritos, I would say. Possibly a cheesy one.
Yeah.
Don't know.
But nevertheless, it was pleasant.
I liked it.
But we have now moved on to Seven Brothers Brewery Slinging It Out Stout, a Choco Stout.
Made with uncycled Kellogg's Cocoa Pops.
What is an upcycled Cocoa Pop?
Well, I don't like to guess, to be honest. I presume it's just like a job lot of Cocoa Pops that Kellogg's don't want because they're the wrong shape. They might be square.
17 years old.
Yeah. Been there a while.
Yeah, but apparently it's... Oh, right, I see. A chocolate stout brewed using upcycled Kellogg's Cocoa Pops provided as part of their sustainability programme.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess when they've got loads of out-of-date Cocoa Pops,
Yeah.
rather than giving them to the homeless,
Yeah.
they give them to a brewery to make stout.
The thing is, if you give them to the homeless, you need to provide milk as well, don't you?
Well,
Dry
That's just
Cocoa
not a good
Pops.
business model.
No, it's rubbish.
Right. Okay, well, let's give it a go anyway.
I like it.
That's actually very light for a stout.
It's good, isn't it?
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Coming off a pale ale,
A good
that's
pudding.
not a bad transition.
A good pudding beer, I would say.
Yeah. So anyway, we've probably gone a little bit off topic already. However, we're back here to do Elric of Melniboné Book 2.
We are.
Although, disclaimer, straight up front, Book 3 is really, really fucking short. So we're doing most of Book 2, and then we'll do the end of Book 2 and Book 3 next time around.
But leave you on a cliffhanger, obviously. You know, we're not going to leave you like...
Not a very good cliffhanger.
No, to be fair, yeah.
And it's all right.
And he did.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, Elric and a lovely cup of tea.
Yeah, it's in the pantheon of cliffhangers, it's not the best.
No.
But it'll do. It'll do for now. So, we last left Elric. He was booted overboard by Smirk and Yerkoon
He
to
was.
sink potentially to his death after leading the fleet and defending Imria from a fleet of reavers.
He was being very indecisive. The one like, oh, let's follow him. Oh, let's not. Oh,
Yeah.
bugger it, let's follow him. And
Yeah.
then gets booted over the top and started sinking into the sea.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that as far as his countrymates were concerned, he wasn't really doing the job in terms of being a decisive leader.
He wasn't the greatest admiral of all time, was he?
No, he wasn't. So Yerkoon basically solved everybody's problem by kicking him overboard, and so he sinks down into the deep.
He does.
So where we begin, Elric is sinking into the deep, dragged down by his armour. Wonder what happens to Orbek's sword. So he had Orbek's sword, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
So that's probably at the bottom of the sea somewhere. So, as he sinks down, let's have a little read. The roaring in his ears gradually faded to a whisper, so that it sounded as if little voices were speaking to him. The voices of the water elementals with whom, in his youth, he had had a kind of friendship.
Yeah. He was probably kind as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the pain in his lungs faded. The red mist cleared from his eyes, and he thought he saw the faces of his father, Sadric, of Cimmeril, and, fleetingly, of Yerkoon. Stupid Yerkoon. For all that he prided himself that he was a Melnibonéan, he lacked the Melnibonéan subtlety. He was as brutal and direct as some of the Young Kingdom barbarians he so much despised. And now Elric began to feel almost grateful to his cousin. This is something of a theme, I think.
His life was
the coming
over.
chapter. Yeah, his life was over. The conflicts which tore his mind would no longer trouble him. His fears, his torments, his loves and his hatreds all lay in the past, and only oblivion lay before him. As the last of his breath left his body, he gave himself wholly to the sea, to Straasha, lord of all the water elementals, once the comrade of Melnibonéan folk. And as he did this, he remembered the old spell which his ancestors had used to summon Straasha. The spell came unbidden into his dying brain.
Yeah, which brings me to a major problem I have with a lot of fantasy books, namely poetry. Namely poetry.
Poems and songs.
Yeah. So poems and songs. Songs probably worse, but what is disguised here is not a great poem.
No.
It's all right. It doesn't even rhyme, does it? A lot of it.
I think it's all in the delivery.
It is. So if you had Shatner reading it, I'd probably go with it. Do you want to try that?
Do you want to give it a Shatner go?
I can't do Shatner. I don't think I'd.
Well,
Waters of the sea, thou givest birth, and were our milk and mother both. No, it's not working.
In days when skies were overcast, you who were first shall be last. That's similarly terrible.
Yeah, so one thing we have learned, and this particular version of the podcast, is neither of us can do impressions of William Shatner.
Yeah, pretty terrible. And we've already gone down a terrible track because I did an awful Schwarzenegger impression in the birthday episode, which I probably shouldn't have raised. So maybe we should just make a rule now. No more impressions.
Apart from Connery, obviously.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, do you want to do the next one in Connery?
She rulers, fathers of our blood, thine aid is sought. Thine aid is sought. Your blood, your salt is blood, our blood, your salt. Your blood, the blood of man.
You see, that's actually
it's
not
a bit
terrible.
Scottish.
Yeah.
But, I'm not doing the rest of it.
No, I was just about to try a Christophe Lambert there, but I'm not going to do it. So Straasha...
Christopher Walken would be good. No.
Straasha, eternal king, eternal sea, thine aid is sought by me. See, it rhymes.
Sorry.
For enemies of thine and mine, seek to defeat our destiny and drain away our sea.
That to me doesn't sound like a spell.
No, it's just a rubbish poem.
No
Although we are in some ways blessed on this occasion because last week I recorded Duel in the Skull Part 2 with Natasha.
Oh, yeah.
The reason that didn't come out before the final programme episode is because two reasons, rum and dogs.
Yeah.
So Neil's still working on the editing and mixing on that one. Thank goodness. I'll leave it to the listeners to decide whether they can tell.
Yeah. And also...
these things were an issue.
Don't forget not to feed rum to dogs.
Yeah, well, no, we didn't do that.
All right, okay. Just check.
But Bo Gentle does about 5 pages of beat poetry.
Yeah, at least you can imagine him busting some shit out with that one. But I think this is kind of... You're sinking... You've got loads of armour on, you're about to die, you're kind of contemplating what your life's like, and then what pops into your head after a couple of faces is a bit of a poem, really.
Yeah, well, of course, he does claim that it went on purpose.
He does.
Because, of course, Straasha, listens to his spell.
He has that.
So we get a little bit of Young Kingdom's world building as Straasha responds. So this is the first time we really kind of get really deep down. Well, not the first time in terms of writing.
No, in the book.
But chronologically for Elric. This is the first time we get down into a little bit of this elemental kind of stuff, which will be a kind of a major feature in this book. But Elric's pretty emo, as usual, saying he didn't really mean to summon the elemental. He's all right with drowning, really. So it's all cool, just let me drown. But Straasha disagrees, and Elric, now convinced he's just dreaming, says, "Oh, all right, send me home then." So Straasha takes Elric to a vast cavern to recuperate, and they talk of fate and higher events than Elric's trivial struggle with Yerkun.
They do, and I think the particular bit where he goes into Strassa's kingdom, very Aquaman, I think.
It is, actually. The description of him is very Poseidon.
It is, but I think the whole... I've only seen Aquaman once, but when I saw it, it did remind me of some weird psychedelic 70s kind of Rodney Marsh, the football.
All sorts in there, didn't it?
Rodney Matthews.
And I was expecting to not particularly like that Aquaman movie, but I loved it just for its influences.
Yeah, I did. It was great, yeah.
All the crazy Deep One stuff around the fishing boat, all the Hollow Earth stuff.
Yeah.
And, all the Ginger Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, always a winner.
was pretty good.
But that's what it kind of reminded me of kind of, when we're talking about the TV show and everything.
Yeah.
Some certain scenes really, you think, right, if you did the first book, for example, you've got a Aquaman kingdom briefly there.
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah, yet again, it's another example of if they end up doing this book for a TV series, people who are not aware of it and aware of, like, you know...
Yeah, it's like, they're following all the tropes
it's
films.
Going to look really derivative, isn't it? It's a real challenge for them, I think.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
But anyway, so Straasha and Elric have a big, deep discussion. Painfully, Elric raised himself into a sitting position. You spoke earlier of intertwined destinies. Do you then know something of my destiny? And Straasha says, a little, I think. Our world grows old. Once the elementals were powerful on your plane, and the people of Melniboné all shared that power. But now our power wanes, as does yours. Something is changing. There are intimations that the lords of the higher worlds are again taking an interest in your world. Perhaps they fear that the folk of the young kingdoms have forgotten them. Perhaps the folk of the young kingdoms threaten to bring in a new age, where gods and beings such as myself no longer shall have a place. I suspect there is a certain unease upon the planes of the higher worlds. So we got that a prefiguring to some degree of Elric's fate and the fate of the world, which is happening. But of course, this is written after the Coram novels, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the Coram novels, which we'll get to at some point, is all about the upheaval of the higher worlds at the hands of Coram and the hand of Quill and the eye of River.
Yeah, I think, the Coram books. I read the Coram books before. I think I mentioned it before the Elric books.
Yeah.
So Arioch was obviously, in the Coram books, is a vastly different beast to the Elric ones.
Yeah. It's starting to just link up little bits and pieces that sit across all the novels in terms of these chaos gods. And once again, we had a discussion in the final programme episode with Hussein regarding Moorcock recycling all of his own material.
Yeah.
And this is another example of that.
I think the thing is that if you've not read any Elric books and you start with this one, it does build the world quite well. So there's no mention of mention chaos gods and things like that, but this is where it kind of first gets introduced, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose at this point, is it 73 he wrote this? So it's 12 years after the Dreaming City, but he's still only in his early 30s. And he's already developed Coram, he's written the History of the Rune Staff, he's written the first Coram trilogy. He's now kind of revisiting Elric, so he can, to some degree, retrospectively start to draw some of these bits and pieces together. I think he does it really nicely. But this whole kind of powers of the higher worlds and all that business starts to become... whereas in the Hawkmoon novels, there is no pantheon as such.
That's what I liked about Hawkmoon as well.
Yeah. Elric and Coram, everything to some extent, and the fate of the characters and the fate of the world is driven by the higher powers.
Yeah, so I think that the Hawkmoon world was kind of... It has been suggested in it that that's where law kind of took over pretty much, wasn't it?
Yeah, but there's no actual reference to law or chaos in any of the books.
But that's what's good about it. But Gran Britannia are almost the agents of law in that kind of world, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because they want to bring order. It just happens to be insane.
Yeah.
Which he kind of revisits one of the gods of law in one of the later books. The one that Migia, the one that's based on Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah. That's right. Well, of course, the only pantheon that is really described in the History of the Rune Staff is the Gran Britannian pantheon.
Yeah.
Harold Wilson.
Churchill and the Beatles, wasn't it?
Churchill, the howling god.
That was it.
And I can't remember exactly how they were couched, but it's basically John, Paul, George and Ringo.
Yeah, it might be Rongo. I can't remember. It was something a bit like... Yeah.
So basically it's just contemporary pop and culture representations. So they have this big, deep discussion, and Straasha gives Elric one final foreboding piece of notice, where he says, "We shall meet again before your life ends, Elric. I hope that I shall be able to aid you once more, and remember that our brothers of air and fire will try to aid you also. And remember the beasts, they too can be of service to you. There is no need to suspect their help. But beware of gods, Elric, beware of the lords of the higher worlds, and remember that their aid and their gifts must always be paid for." Crucial words of warning.
It is, and also obviously preempting what happens later.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chapter 2, titled A New Emperor and an Emperor Renewed. The Erkoon and the Melnibonian fleet limp back to Imria under sail power as the slave crews are mostly dead from their unnatural exertions.
This is one of my favourite chapters, actually. I really liked it. It was cool. It jumps from different characters as well, doesn't it? So
it does.
our first introduction of diving Tivar's mind.
Yeah. There's a lot of diving Tivar in these upcoming chapters.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because I didn't necessarily remember it.
So he's kind of like so he's a Melniboné, isn't he? But not a dickhead, really. He's Elric's best mate, isn't he? And he kind of balances out Elric a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And he's got his, of course, Yakun's all cock-a-hoop and full of himself. Admiral Megum Colin less so. He's kind of keeping his own counsel.
He's probably stroking his tash, trying to walk in a straight line.
Absolutely, yeah. He's thinking, oh, well, Yakun did the deed, but maybe if it had gone the other way, that might have been a better solution. Whereas diving Tavar's mourning Elric on his ship, which has got the most brilliant name,
isn't it?
Terhali's Particular Satisfaction. And when I read that, the first thing I thought of was Ian M. Banks.
So did I. That's exactly what I wrote down.
Yeah,
it was... Because, that's one of my favourite bits about the Ian M. Banks books. Just the names of the ships are brilliant, aren't they? But this, I never noticed that before, ever. And I was like, what a brilliant name for a ship.
Yeah. And it does make you think, doesn't it? These little things kind of plant seeds in people's brains.
Yeah.
I wonder.
I reckon he must have read them.
But that's an absolutely brilliant ship name. But he's mulling over the possibility of vengeance should it be the case that Elric was in fact bumped off. And you're right, this is a really fantastic chapter that really reinforces kind of the decayed, decadent evil of Melniboné and high society and clarifies quite clearly why Yakun is more suitable fit for the Emperor.
Yeah.
As the city learns of Elric's death as they pull in, and the normal form would be to mourn in traditional Melnibonéan fashion. And
the wild dance of Melniboné, right. Which is absolutely brilliant.
It's absolutely fantastic.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah. So it says, next night and for 7 nights in all, the wild dance of Melniboné would fill the streets. Potions and petty spells would ensure that no one slept, for sleep was forbidden to any Melnibonéan, old or young, while a dead emperor was mourned. Naked, the dragon princes would prowl the city, taking any young woman they found and filling her with their seed, for it was tradition that if an emperor died, then nobles of Melniboné must create as many children of aristocratic blood as was possible. Music slaves would howl from the top of every tower. Other slaves would be slain, and some eaten.
Yeah. Bring a bit of cannibalism. Well, it's a feast.
Yeah, well, they're fucking arseholes, aren't they?
The wrong uns,
for the most part, yeah.
So that'll be interesting how they crowbar that into... Because when I was reading it, I keep going back to this TV show, and I was like... Yeah, what would you do with that? So that would be like a great flashback.
Yeah. Well, just the reference to music slaves. Yeah. Because we've read the book one.
Yeah.
We know that even just a simple reference to music slaves has all sorts of horrible connotations.
Yeah. And I think we touched on how bad the music must have been.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, pulling into the harbour, DT.
Yeah.
Well, I'll call diving to the because it's easier. Mulls over the bad omens. Portended by an emperor drowning and going to save Pyre, the tentacled whisperer of impossible secrets. And his plan is basically to go and sulk in the dragon caves.
yeah, it's not much of a plan, is it?
No, not really.
But I think it also shows that he's probably slightly different to everybody else as well. He's not going, let's look forward to the wild dance.
Yeah.
I'm off to go and hang out with some dragons.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Yakun docks and swaggers like a twat up to Cimmeril, who twigs what's gone down, and she's not particularly happy. She doesn't do her personal guard any favours, though, and calls for them to kill Yakun. And a few of them draw the swords.
Yeah.
But the captain of a guard takes a particularly pragmatic approach in stepping in and making sure that nothing can go down. He orders his men to sheathe their swords, but one, a young fella, who's very pro-Cimmeril.
Yeah.
He's not having that. So, poor lad, he steps up and this unpleasant captain kills him from behind.
Yeah, and then we go into the mind of the captain, don't we? Which, again, I suppose that a lot of modern fantasy novels are really tight third person, where you just get their viewpoint.
Yeah.
There's POVs all over the shop in this chapter, isn't
there? Yeah, there is, yeah.
Which I kind of... It doesn't seem that jarring when you read it.
In a way, I kind of see where he's coming from.
Yeah, I think because Elric's not there obviously.
Yeah, he thinks Elric's dead.
You need to balance out with different views of how they view Yakun, isn't it? So you've got some going, I suppose he'll be all right. A couple going, they hate him, and then you've got others going,
Yeah, and it says the captain, who was a practical man, said to his warriors in a low voice, "Sheathe your weapons and salute your new emperor." Only the young guardsman who loved Cimmeril disobeyed. "But he slew the emperor. My lady Cimmeril said so." "What of it? He's emperor now. Kneel, or you'll be dead in a minute." The young warrior gave a wild shout and leapt toward Yerkun, who stepped back, trying to free his arms from the folds of his cloak. He had not expected this. But it was the captain who leapt forward, his own sword drawn, and hacked down the youngster so that he gasped, half-turned, and fell at Yerkun's feet. So he has this display of loyalty to Yerkun, but, thinking about things pragmatically, not entirely unreasonable.
No. And then you've got this particular bit, which kind of sums him up a bit. Leering, the Emperor Yerkun presented himself before her. He reached out his hand and caressed her neck, her cheek, her mouth, and let his hand fall so it grazed her breast. "Sister," he said, "thou art mine entirely now." It's not ideal, is it?
No, not really. For the second episode running, incestuous behaviour raised its ugly head.
Incest. It seems to be a common theme throughout the work.
Yeah. So he sends Cimmeril off to her tower to be guarded by the captain and some of his men. And then Yerkun looks back at the corpse of the young warrior and says, "And feed that to our slaves tonight so he can continue serving her." He smiled, and the captain smiled too.
Appreciating the joke.
That's right.
Hilarious.
Yeah. He felt it was good to have a proper emperor in Melniboné again. So the captain's a true Melnibonéan.
And then you get his kind of his plan for the next kind of 10, 15 years, don't you? Where Melniboné is out there taking over the Young Kingdoms again. What luxuries of torment would he bring up those upstart sea lords, particularly Count Smiorgan Baldhead? He's back in the game.
Yeah. Well, fair play. I can't say I'm a fan of Smiorgan Baldhead because it's called Smiorgan Baldhead.
Yeah.
Unless Bob Hoskins could do a really, really charismatic turn as Smiorgan Baldhead, I'm pretty much anti-Baldhead.
Yeah, maybe, what was he called before he went bald? Did he have a mullet?
Smiorgan comb over.
Yeah, that was 10 years before, and then before that, luxurious locks. Yeah.
So he's happy because Yerkun is a true Melnibonéan and he sees opportunity for himself. So, marching at the head of his army, Yerkun struts, it says, to the Tower of Putna.
Yep.
The Tower of Emperors. And they go through the thronging streets, people prostrate themselves, and he enters the palace in the Hall of the Ruby Throne, but his cocky, triumphant stride is halted when he sees a coward figure on the throne. Which is
my favourite bit. It's just ace. Yeah. So here you have Yerkun, who's Johnny Big Potatoes, cock and a walk, check me out.
Yeah.
That dude's just, they've all got my back. It's going to be ace. Be looking forward to this. I'm on the throne. Hey up.
Yeah.
Who's this coward figure?
Yeah. Well, it's only bloody Elric, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Who'd have thought it?
Blimey. How did he get back there? So, yeah.
Who's the guy who fell off the wall?
Diving Tarkan.
Yeah,
if only Diving Tarkan could come back. Actually, as a quick callback to our Dreaming City episode, when we were frankly appalled and disgusted that Smiorgan Baldhead got a stat block in the game, but Diving Tarkan didn't. Diving Tarkan did.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, I found it. I found it. So
didn't he have balance of 15? Or something?
They put a nice little gag in there that he had terrible balance. So anyway, Yerkun's party is completely, utterly smashed,
and that would be such an ace scene.
Yeah,
in a TV show. Yeah. There he is, bigging it up.
Yeah. So chapter 3, traditional justice.
Which is quite funny.
Yeah, it is quite entertaining. Diving Tavar and his men seize Yerkun and he creates a fuss like a frustrated nipper. He's super not happy in any way.
He panted like a wolf.
Yep.
And he realises it's the traditional thing, isn't it? The bully who thought everybody had his back was a bit like, oh, crap.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I've made a right balls up for this.
Yeah, so while Elric's playing it cool, Yerkun tries to summon Ariok.
Yeah.
What's going on, Ariok?
Oh,
Elric's,
come on.
Elric's a twat. Come and sort him out.
Yeah, but that didn't work. Weirdly.
But it's
that's the first thing where you see, obviously, a Melnibonéan trying to summon you don't know who Ariok is at the time. Well, he's a Duke of Hell.
Yeah.
But what is that?
Yeah. Although, of course, because we've read things prior, Ariok does make a showing in the Dreaming City, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But at this point, we've kind of got this stage where we have a description where people are... the idea that Chaos Lord would answer someone's call this point is like a real fucking long shot.
Yeah, so I think Elric's laughing at this. Arioch does not hear. Chaos is weak upon this earth now. And it needs a greater sorcery in the earth to bring them back, which, again, bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Yerkun is a little bit in awe of Elric's return and the possibility that Elric has these powerful supernatural friends. I think he's a bit taken aback. And he says, you'd vowed not to use your sorcery. And Elric's like, he said, I want a proper Melniboné, and well, I am now, because I've used it.
And because of that, it's going to be hilarious.
Yeah. So at this stage, Arioch just ain't interested, and that obviously changes in the 60s books, because Arioch turns up pretty much every time Elric can't open a jar of jam.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, Arioch, aid me. And he's always there. So, we're just, Loz is just going to crack open a couple more beers. Let's see what we're going to get. I'm quite excited. Right, so what we've got here. First pod vanilla stout.
Yep.
Let's give this a go.
So where were we? Yeah, we're talking about the... you were right. So if Elric stubbed his toe, he'd get Arioch involved.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I can't get the cellophane off this Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Arioch, aid me!
Which is quite tricky, I do think.
And Arioch, to be fair, does generally turn up, but at the moment... having none of it.
I've not got a bottle opener. I'm in the middle of the Sahine Desert. Yeah. Come on, Arioch. Sort me out.
So meanwhile, DT turns up, bringing Cimmeril in, as well as the captain of our guard, and we learn his name at this point.
Yeah.
Which is Valeric. Captain Valeric. And Valeric is attempting to endear himself to Elric, saying, I thought you were dead. My loyalty is to the throne. Yeah. But Elric is
exactly
feeling...
how he said it.
Yeah, Elric's not having it.
No.
So he kind of condemns him to a pretty terrible but very Melnibonéan punishment.
Yeah, so I think that's what it's called. Traditional justice. He basically... Elric in this chapter is a bit like, you wanted a Melnibonéan emperor.
Yeah.
I'll give you one of them. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it. He's kind of given up a bit stroppy teenager again.
Yeah.
But Valeric, not so good for him, is it?
Yeah, so he's not quite sobbing, but...
He says, slay me swiftly, doesn't he?
He does.
Punish me more.
Yeah, but he asks how he slew the young warrior, and he says, with my sword I cut him down, it was a clean stroke, but one. And Elric says, but what became of the corpse? Prince Yerkun told me to feed it to Princess Cimmeril's slaves. I understand. Very well, Prince Yerkun. You may join us at the feast tonight while Captain Valeric entertains us with his dying. Yerkun's face was almost as pale as Elric's. What do you mean? The little pieces of Captain Valeric's flesh, which our Dr. Jest will carve from his limbs, will be the meat on which you feast. You may give instructions as to how you wish the captain's flesh prepared. We should not expect you to eat it raw, cousin. So at this point, even DT and Cimmeril are pretty surprised by this.
Yeah.
But then he kind of takes himself down a peg or two. Because he sends them away, mopes a bit, as is de rigueur for the albino, obviously. And then he kind of shares that he's thinking about just banishing Yerkun.
Yeah, because DT, as we're calling him, Cimmeril, go, that was really clever cruelty.
Yeah.
We like that, like what you did.
Yeah.
It'll be hilarious at dinner.
And then goes, I think I'll just banish Yerkun.
Yeah, and everybody's going, ooh, I won't do that.
Yeah, she's like,
ooh. He thought about it. He just booted you off a ship.
But anyway, he fucks off and has a rest.
Goes for a bit of a lie down, doesn't he?
Yeah, goes for a lie down, which is
constitutional.
Which is fair. He's had a rough couple of days.
Yeah, he's died. He's come back. He's met some guy with a green beard.
So he goes for a kip, and then he comes back, and everybody's in the hall. Dr. Jest is there sharpening his knives, but something's not quite right. Cimmeril's not there. Yerkun's not there. And Divin Tavar rushes in, covered in blood. Well, Yerkun's only used sorcery to get away, hasn't he?
He has, and it's a very cool description as well for all the role players out there.
Yeah.
It's,
do it. Describe it.
I will. I'm just going to open this can.
Okay. Well, while you're preparing yourself, I'll just read a little bit from this. Oh no, the writing's fucking tiny.
Yeah, let's put my matron past my reading spectacles.
Yeah.
Then all at once the doors of the throne room burst open, and there was diving Tivar, gasping and bloody, his clothes slashed and his flesh gashed. And following him in came a mist, a swelling mist of dark purples and unpleasant blues. It was this mist that groaned.
Groaning mist, I like that.
Unpleasant blues.
Yeah.
That was like some of the U2 stuff they did on Rattle and Tom.
Yeah, that'd do me in.
Yeah, that's what I imagine it as.
Yeah.
And then it's Yerkun's sorcery. He conjured the groaning mist to aid him in his escape. Groaning mist, that's a D&D thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I bet you any money there will be some kind of ritual in the Stormbringer RPG called Groaning Mist.
Yeah.
If there ain't, I'll be really good at this point.
Yeah. It tried to follow him from the city, but the mist engulfed me and I lost my senses. So once again, he's lost Cimmeril.
Yeah. So she's gone. Valeric's gone with him. Bloody Valeric.
Yeah.
And 100 warriors who remain secretly loyal to him. So he's got his posse. He's got Cimmeril. He's got Valeric, who is now his faithful, villainous captain. So the bugger off.
And there's a role-playing scenario just to hunt down Yerkun and his 100 men.
Yeah, there's a few decent
there is,
campaign stroke one-off adventures pop out of this.
Yeah.
So on to chapter 4. It's called Chaos Lord. So Elric is super bummed that Yerkun has sorceried his way out of things. So he has DT dispatch men all over the Young Kingdoms to find Cimmeril. Months pass, dragon riders fly the skies.
They do.
No dice.
Nobody can find him.
Nope.
Maybe he's gone to Ipswich.
Elric's self-reflective, but still, he remains somewhat sympathetic to Yerkun's perspective. Which, once again, it's like, Elric, come on, man.
Yeah.
Get a grip.
You know, you make a mistake once, blah, 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 you know, the old saying, but Jesus Christ, what's he seeing, Yerkun? You know?
Well, I think this gives a little bit of indication. I think it's not so much what he sees in Yerkun, it's his own terrible opinion of himself.
Yeah.
And that feeling I think that everybody has when they're anxious and down. And that's one of the things that I find, you know, we joke about Elric being a murpy emo twat, but actually everybody's been Elric at some point because he doubts himself and he has all of his anxieties. And it's like, oh, maybe it is me. Yeah. Maybe he is right. Maybe it is me. And that's quite relatable.
And to be fair, they're probably right because, you know, if you, as we said before, from a Melnibonian perspective, Elric's rubbish, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's an overthinker, he's a procrastinator, he's too soft, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, he's obviously got dad problems.
Yeah. So he's thinking to himself and he thinks, finally, one can only judge oneself by one's actions, thought Elric. I have looked at what I have done, not at what I have meant to do or thought I would like to do, and what I have done has, in the main, been foolish, destructive, and with little point. Yerkun was right to despise me, and that was why I hated him so. So he's actually putting Yerkun in the position of being right. Again.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence from the lad.
Yeah. More months pass. Search parties return with no news. So, again, another game idea, one-off game, or maybe even a series of games. Apologies to people listening who don't play games, but we do. So the idea of a bunch of Melniboné warriors sent out into the Young Kingdoms on a mission to find Cimmeril. Oh, possibilities are endless.
There are, yeah. You could even meet Smeog and Baldhead in a tavern.
Yeah, this is one thing that I think... I'm generally quite critical of the Stormbringer role-playing game because I don't want to be a Phil Carey pint man.
No, who does?
You know, but that's essentially what the game is kind of built for. It's adventuring in the world of the Young Kingdoms. But actually, if the party are all Melnibonéans, nobles, warriors, and you get to experience the world from the perspective of the Melnibonéans, that's interesting because that's what the books are.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only problem with that is it depends on the players, doesn't it? Because Melnibonéans are generally arses. It's kind of... You don't want murder pobos and... Yeah,
I think we're quite fortunate then, the people that we play with, they're not all, you know, total murder hobos.
No. But I agree. It's an interesting premise, especially if you get the son of Dr. Jest out there. And,
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, Elric's working on buffing himself up. He's working on new potions, new herbal remedies, and he gets in the library to study some dangerous grimoires. I do like the word grimoire.
It's a good word, isn't it? Have you got any grimoires in your bookshelf?
Sadly not, I don't think.
No.
I could just say I have.
I imagine you might.
You know what? Fuck it, I have.
You've got a lot of books.
Got a lot of books. I'm going to say now, some of them are grimoires.
Yeah, I've got a grimoire as well.
Yeah. So his entire purpose is in studying all these dangerous grimoires is to summon a Chaos Lord.
Yeah, and I think just to go back to kind of economy of language, all of that, which we've just been whittering on about for about 10 minutes, is 2 pages.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
Yeah,
that is 2 pages long of Melnibonians going out to the Young Kingdom. Elric with his soliloquy, 2 pages of text, pretty much. I think lots of people can learn from that.
Yeah,
because that could be like probably half a book with some of the writers I've read.
Very true. When he had meditated for more than 5 hours, Elric took a brush and a jar of ink and began to paint both walls and floor with complicated symbols, some of which were so intricate that they seemed to disappear at an angle to the surface on which they had been laid. At last this was done, and Elric spread-eagled himself in the very centre of his huge rune, face down, one hand upon his grimoire, the other, with the Actorius upon it, stretched palm down. The moon was full. A shaft of its light fell directly upon Elric's head, turning the hair to silver, and then the summoning began.
Which is awesome. It's really cool, that bit. I think some of it reminds me a bit of Lovecraft. I don't know why.
It's the weird angles.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think magic and sorcery is generally pretty crap in a lot of books, but it's quite interesting because a lot of it is quite alien, apart from the poems, which we were slagging off earlier. Yeah. This is more like it.
We'll get to that in a bit, but there's another summoning later on as well, and these summonings are much more interesting and much more sinister sounding than a bad sub-Tolkien poem about, rhyme and grime or whatever the hell it was. So he thinks he's failed at first, but Arioch comes at first in the form of a fly, but then in the form he uses many times in the stories, which is that of the beautiful youth.
Yeah, can I just go back slightly to the when he's doing the summoning? So it just says, Elric sent his mind into twisting tunnels of logic across endless planes of ideas through mountains of symbolism and endless universes of alternative truths. He sent his mind out further and further, and as it went, he sent with it the words which issued from his writhing lips, words that few of his contemporaries would understand, though their very sound would chill the blood of any listener.
That's
cool. Isn't it?
That's it's very Lovecraft.
Yeah.
It's also that thing about sending your mind out into weird places. Have you ever read House on the Borderland by William R. Hodgson?
Not for years.
Yeah, you know what? We should do that.
We should do
that because that was one of Pops's books that he gave to me. Sadly, the original version of it got chewed up by my dog. You remember Bella back at Skelter? Yeah. So my granddad's beautiful sphere edition of The House on the Borderlands with the Pigman on the cover, which is a white dwarf cover as well. That one, She chewed that to pieces.
Really?
I'm drunk with Phil when we first got together, and I'm telling her about my granddad's books because I'm a boring bastard.
Yeah.
And I'm telling her about that specific cover. And then for Christmas that year, I unwrap a present, and it's a shrink-wrapped, pristine condition copy of that exact same sphere edition. So I have got it again.
She is
in perfect condition, but it's not the same one, but it might as well be. And it's actually in better condition because it's like new. Yeah. Fabulous.
Bella wasn't the Alsatian, was she?
No, Bella was the one that was kind of fat and old, but thought she could take the Alsatian and regularly tried to.
She was cool. What was the Alsatian called?
Tess.
Yeah. That's a time travelling
blast
bit.
From the past.
Just a bit, yeah.
Yeah. And a beautiful youth stood where the fly had hovered. The beautiful youth spoke in a beautiful voice, soft and sympathetic, yet manly. Kind of like me. It was clad in a robe that was like a liquid jewel, and yet which did not dazzle Elric, for in some way no light seemed to come from it. There was a slender sword at the youth's belt, and he wore no helm, but a circlet of red fire. His eyes were wise, and his eyes were old, and when they were looked at closely, they could be seen to contain an ancient and confident evil. So, we had that conversation earlier on about Gran Breton potentially being of law, but the history of the room stuff being generally godless. But at this stage, we're still really getting that kind of idea that chaos still has the evil tag.
Yeah.
And Arioch is deeply evil. And I don't think there's any kind of indication in the Coram novels that chaos is anything other than pretty much evil.
No, they're all wrong ones, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, Arioch kind of it's alluded that he invented humans for a laugh, isn't it?
Yeah. You know what? We'll do Coram.
Yeah,
we'll do Coram before long. In fact, once we've finished this and we've done Daenus and the Dark Straits of Reglathium, we'll start on Coram. Elric effectively does the deal with the devil now, even though he's fully fearful of the implications.
He really does sell his soul, doesn't he?
He does, totally.
Yeah.
Says the youth was taller now than Elric. He looked down at the Emperor of Melniboné, and he smiled the smile that the fly had smiled. You alone are fit to serve Arioch. It is long since I was invited to this plane, but now that I am here, I shall aid you, Elric. I shall become your patron. I shall protect you and give you strength, and the source of strength. The master I be, and slave you be. How must I serve you, Duke Arioch? Elric asked, having made a monstrous effort at self-control, for he was filled with terror by the implications of Arioch's words. You will serve me by serving yourself for the moment. Later, a time will come when I shall call upon you to serve me in specific ways, but for the moment, I ask little of you, save that you swear to serve me. And that's another piece of that Elric's fate jigsaw slips into place. And of course, we'll see as time goes by whether he actually fulfills that bargain. But he's made the bargain.
And has he done it for love, or has he done it for revenge, or has he done it for...
He's done it because Cimmeril. That's pretty much it, isn't it? Yeah. If Eakun had just fucked off...
On his own.
Gone
to live on an island,
maybe. Probably not overly worried, but it's all about Cimmeril. So Elric swears, and his course to his ultimate fate and the fate of the young kingdoms is essentially cast. And then Arioch points Elric to the nations of... here we go, pronunciation time. Oin.
I went for Oin.
Oin.
Yeah.
The nations of Oin and Yu, which Eakun has conquered through sorcery and with the Mirror of Memories, a powerful artifact that contains the memories of potentially millions that have looked into it.
Confusion +5.
And Arioch says, yeah, you know what? You know what you need to get there? You need the ship which sails over land and sea. Well, of course you do. Magic ship.
Yeah, you need a magic ship. Or you could just go on horse or donkey, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Chapter 5, the ship which sails over land and sea, he actually does check with DT regarding could we go there on dragons instead. Because, magic ships, how about the dragons?
They're not for everyone, are they?
No, but the dragons are all tuckered out still. And this is another really, really great Dive into Var chapter.
It is, yeah.
It's almost all from Dive into Var's point of view, which is really... He's a good character. So it turns out he needs the ship, but there's some really, really nice narrative and dialogue between Elric and Dive into Var. And Elric strategises with him, he confides in him. There's some really kind of cool bits where Dive into Var starts to feel the burden of Elric's conscience, and he doesn't like it because it feels un-Melnibonéan.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he's taking it on board. And as this chapter goes on, Elric gets more and more high, and Dive into Var gets more and more introspective and kind of trapped with his thoughts. But Elric knows that he needs the help of Straasha again, because, it's all right saying the ship that sails on land and sea. But he remembers from his reading in the library that he probably needs the help of Straasha. So, off they go to an isolated beach, and Elric begins a summoning. And once again, this is a much cooler and more interesting take on how you might summon a water elemental than the bad poem.
Yeah.
In the first chapter. Dive into Var was no stranger to the high speech. As a Melnibonéan noble, he had been taught it as a matter of course. But the words seemed none the less strange to him, for Elric used peculiar inflections and emphases, giving the words a special and secret weight, and chanting them in a voice which ranged from bass groan to falsetto shriek. It was not pleasant to listen to such noises coming from a mortal throat, and now Dive into Var had some clear understanding of why Elric was reluctant to use sorcery. The Lord of the Dragon Caves, Melnibonéan though he was, found himself inclined to step backwards a pace or two, even retire to the cliff tops, and watch over Elric from there, and he had to force himself to hold his ground as the summoning continued. So more great description of how genuinely terrifying and awful it must be to witness this. And again, if they get it right in a TV show,
it'd be cool.
This will be the stuff that would be unique, and we won't really be seeing anybody else doing it.
Yeah, and Dive into Var is going to be if you're doing a TV show, he'd be a main character, wouldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's some really cool stuff. There's just that interplay between the two characters, because Elric's kind of, as you said, he's quite on a high, and he said, when all this is done and Princess Cymriel brought home, you shall blow the dragon horn, and our dragon brothers will hear it, and you and I shall sing the song of the dragon, and our goads shall flash as we straddle Flame Fang, and his mate, Sweetclaw. So basically, they were all going to get on the dragons, and it's great. But Derry his brow was clouded. Let us pray that day will come, my lord. But I cannot help this nagging thought which tells me that Imri's days are numbered, and that my own life nears its close.
Yeah.
There mentions his sons, which Elric didn't know about. So we've got Diving Slorm, and the other one was Diving Mav, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mav, yeah.
Diving Slorm obviously makes his appearance in Stormbringer.
Of course, yeah. He will be back as a grown man.
He will be.
Yeah.
Which kind of suggests, because Slorm's obviously in Stormbringer, how long is Elric pissing around in the Young Kingdoms with Moonglen?
I suppose there are a lot of stories, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's in Tanalon for a bit, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah, yes. And he's settled with, is it Marshalla of the Dawn?
No, he's Zarazinia.
Zarazinia, yeah.
Yeah.
He's settled with her for quite a while.
Marshalla, he had conjugals, didn't
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, we've not even got there, so we're kind of preempting what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, from memory, I think didn't Theleb Kana kidnap his girlfriend about 47 times?
Theleb Kana was like a rubbish Pantangian, wasn't he?
Theleb Kana is the closest thing you get in Elric to a Conan villain.
Yeah, but what was the woman called?
Was it Zarazinia, wasn't it?
No, Zarazinia was she was about 16 in it. That was his he met her in the Forest of Trews, I think, off the top of my head.
You know what? We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Possibly in 2023.
Yeah.
But we will get to it.
Well, it still exists.
Once again, it seems like he's not really successfully summoned anything, but then, of course, Straasha comes piling up the beach. The watery bulk rocks up, and Straasha's aware and concerned that Elric's invited the Chaos Lords, but, he's kind of pragmatic about it. Well, it turns out that the ship is co-owned by Straasha and his brother Grom.
King Grom.
Yeah, Grom of the land below the roots, Grom of the ground, and all that lives under it. My brother, Grom. Long since, even as we elementals count time, Grom and I built that ship so that we could travel between the realms of earth and water whenever we chose. But we quarrelled. May we be cursed for such foolishness. And we fought. There were earthquakes, tidal waves, volcanic eruptions, typhoons and battles, in which all the elementals joined, with the result that new continents were flung up and old ones drowned. It was not the first time we'd fought each other, but it was the last. And finally, lest we destroy each other completely, we made a peace. I gave Grom part of my domain, and he gave me the ship which sails over land and sea. But he gave it somewhat unwillingly, and thus it sails the sea better than it sails the land, for Grom thwarts its progress whenever it can. Still, if the ship is of use to you, you shall have it. I wonder if that'll be a feature. I think it probably will. So DT and Elric head back. Elric's now aware of his sons, and DT actually does plead with Elric to take responsibility for his sons and their welfare, but Elric doesn't really get what he's driving at, I don't think. By saying it, Davin Tavar's really saying, you know what, they're Melnibonéans.
Will they have a future?
Will they have a future? And Elric's like,
it's going to be ace.
It'll be amazing.
This magic boat.
Because Elric's still kind of high as a kite on all this stuff. And he's upbeat. And he seems to have transferred all his angst and foreboding to Davin Tavar.
He does.
And Davin Tavar is really fearing Elric's self-absorption at this point. He's still upbeat but impatient, and this is so out of character for Elric. Davin Tavar actually starts to wonder if Elric's getting a bit doolally from all the potions and sorcery. And he expresses his concern, but Elric rebuffs him good-naturedly, and then the ship arrives. So Elric's still high and in good spirits as slaves take supplies on board the ship, and the Melnibonéan crew board because he's taking a pretty decent-sized gang with him. And soon they're shooting over the land, and even Davin Tavar starts to cheer up. But of course, it doesn't last because the ship starts to buck and list from side to side, and a sailor falls from the rigging, smashing all of his bones. Something's not quite right.
But first they go to a waterfront inn at a place called heading outward and coming safely back home again. And he has a bit of a chat with the barman, which is very D&D. He asks him a few questions, and he's the usual NPC, not massively useful. Goes, don't know, to be honest, it'll be ace, have some wine. Yeah, but then obviously some wailing gnashing of teeth, guy overboard, and boom.
Elric stared at the body of the fallen sailor. Suddenly the mood of gaiety left him completely, and he gripped the rail in his black gauntleted hands, and he gritted his strong teeth, and his crimson eyes glowed, and his lips curled in self-mockery. What a fool I am! What a fool I am to tempt the gods so! So, old Elric is back, all of a sudden. Still, though the ship moved almost as swiftly as it had done, there seemed to be something dragging at it, as if Grome's minions clung on to the bottom, as barnacles might cling in the sea. And Elric sensed something around him in the air, something in the rustling of the trees through which they passed, something in the movement of the grass and the bushes and the flowers over which they crossed, something in the weight of the rocks, of the angle of the hills, and he knew what he sensed was the presence of Grome of the ground, Grome of the land below the roots, Grome who desired to own what he and his brother Straasha had once owned jointly, what they had made as a sign of the unity between them and over which they had then fought. Grome wanted very much to take back the ship which sails over land and sea, and Elric, staring down at the black earth, became afraid. Oh, Elric.
What have you done?
Yeah, you got yourself all high and full of yourself very briefly there. And that is where we shall leave part 2. Part 2 of Elric of Melniboné. So I'm liking it. It's going well. Elric, yeah, is a bit of a goof. But you know what? I kind of love the characterisation of him, and you get the feel now that
he's made a terrible mistake.
He's made a terrible mistake, but it also comes across as a more rounded character, and I think that's because of the additional narrative. In the 60s stories, really the only alternative perspective you get on Elric is from Moongloom's perspective.
Yeah,
Moongloom isn't really much of a character.
He's not massively rounded, is he?
No.
He's just there to go... He's the Grey Mouser, isn't he?
Yeah, basically. And, you know, of course, we haven't covered any of the stories with Moongloom in. We will do at some point. But Diving Tavar is a much more interesting secondary character. And that kind of whole perspective he has on Elric, and the fact that Elric's anxieties and moods transfer to him to the point where he becomes super down and fearful for the future of not only his civilization but his sons, and he has that terrible premonition that everything is going to grind to a halt, which turns out to be pretty true, is all good stuff.
There's one bit which I can't find at the moment, but he's talking about Elric, and when he's looking at him, he's talking about maybe he's almost going back to what the Melniboné ancestors were like.
Yeah.
But I can't find the chapter.
I've actually got a note about that.
Because I thought that was really interesting, the fact that he's got enough kind of nous to think like that, instead of just going, Elric's a bit of a rubbish Melniboné, and he's almost... There's one bit where he's basically talking about that Elric's almost like a flashback to their ancestors.
It's here. So there's a point where it's after they've summoned Straasha, and it's after he's had the conversation about his sons. It says, Diving Tavar was struck by the same emotion which had filled him on the beach, watching Elric begin his rune. Perhaps it was not by chance that he had used the example of his sons when speaking to Elric earlier that day, for he had a feeling that was almost protective, as if Elric were a boy looking forward to some treat which might not bring him the joy he expected. Diving Tavar dismissed the thoughts as best he could and went to his own bed. Elric might blame himself for all that had occurred in the question of Yerkun and Cimmeril, but Diving Tavar wondered if he too were not to blame in some part. Perhaps he should have offered his advice more cogently, more vehemently even, or earlier, and made a stronger attempt to influence the young emperor. And then, in the Melnibonéan manner, he dismissed such doubts and questions as pointless. There was only one rule: seek pleasure however you would. But had that always been the Melnibonéan way? Diving Tavar wondered suddenly if Elric might not have regressive rather than deficient blood. Could Elric be a reincarnation of one of their most distant ancestors? Had it always been in the Melnibonéan character to think only of one's self and one's own gratification? And again, Diving Tavar dismissed the question. What use was there in questions after all? The world was the world, a man was a man. Before he sought his own bed, he went to visit both his old mistresses, waking them up and insisting that he see his sons, Diving Slorm and Diving Mav. And when his sons, sleepy-eyed, bewildered, had been brought to him, he stared at them for a long time before sending them back. He had said nothing to either, but he had brought his brows together frequently and rubbed at his face and shaken his head, and when they had gone, he said to Niopal and Saramal, his mistresses, who were as bewildered as their offspring, "Let them be taken to the Dragon Caves tomorrow and begin their learning."
That was it, yeah. Which I thought was a really cool bit.
Yeah.
And it really fleshes out his character, but also fleshes out Elric's character as well.
Yeah, I think Elric's character development in this really dwarfs anything that took place in any of the 60s stories, and it's largely because of Diving Tavar's perspective.
Yeah, it needed that, I think, and it needed that shift of POV across the story, I think. But, I mean, yeah, back to the TV show, he's got to be a major character, really.
Yeah, well, let's do Lord Shark's ostentatious couch for this show then. So today, Lord Shark's ostentatious couch is an old crappy sofa on Moorcock seafront covered in cigarette burns, and it's really, really damp.
Again.
Yeah. Somebody today on Twitter did some really great fantasy casting suggestions. Lawrence of Arabia era Peter O'Toole
as
Elric.
Yeah.
That would be very cool. But one of the people that was suggested it was in Twin Peaks The Return as a potential Elric, who I think I had pegged as probably a good Coon, has popped up in The Witcher as
Which one is it?
So you remember the first episode of The Witcher? There's like a villain on horseback who's leading the army.
Oh,
in black
yeah,
armour.
Yeah.
That's the guy who the pastor suggested would make a great Elric Coon. But The Witcher's bagged him already. Although I haven't watched all The Witcher, so I don't know how often he pops up in it.
I have sadly watched all of The Witcher.
All right, unlucky. Does he pop up again?
He does. Yeah, he's in it.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to tell with all the crazy flashbacks and time shifts, but he was all right. I think he's probably looks wise. Maybe it's hard to tell from an acting point of view, so I don't think he had to do much.
Right.
To be honest. So I don't know. It's as long as they don't go down. I mean, The Witcher had elves in it, didn't it, at one point? Yeah,
you know what? That's the last episode I watched is the one that had the elves in it. At that point, I was like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah, I watched that bit. Well, I've watched it all. It was all right. It was what it was. Again, White Wolf. Slightly weird eyes.
Yeah, the fact that they refer to him as the White Wolf really is colossally irritating.
It is.
But, I think other than that, it's kind of all superficial, really, because the world of The Witcher isn't really a Moorcock world. It's just lame, generic, derivative fantasy nonsense. And the Witcher character is more Solomon Kane than Elric.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually.
Yeah.
It's that kind of traditional, gruff, as I said, charismaless lead, pretty much.
Which is a shame, because Henry Cavill, if he's allowed to, has got quite a lot of charisma.
He's a good actor, yeah. I just think, it was one of those things. It was all right.
Yeah. I think we'll have to periodically return to this whole issue of the Elric show, even though it'll probably be years and then we'll never hear anything and nobody will talk about it again. But I think once we've done a few more of the Elric stories, we should probably do an episode on that Stormbringer script.
Yeah, definitely. That was really quite interesting.
Yeah. Because it's not Elric, it's Ulrich, isn't it? It's a bit of a mashup of Elric and Von Beck.
And Bastable.
And Ericos and Bastable and airships.
Yeah.
It's
quite interesting, actually. I was surprised when I read it. It was, calling it Stormbringer was probably not a good...
Yeah, it was a bit of a stretch. But it was interesting reading.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Right, anyway, we have a pan of chilli to tuck into and a shitload more interesting beers in the fridge. Sadly, we're going to miss our veganuary target because it's basically all beef.
I
apologise if you had a veganuary.
Yeah, as if.
Yeah.
Balls that. I've dry January, veganuary, whatever. I've just balls that.
Amusingly, one of the coppers Phil works with has been calling it Vad January.
Maybe I have to edit that one out.
I suppose that's police humour. I don't know. I probably will edit that out.
Yeah.
Right, so once again, Loz, thanks very, very much for your time, and we'll get back together soon to do the last part of Elric of Melniboné, which I can't wait to do because, damn it, I need to do Daenerys in the Dark Straits of Reglathium.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, again, I read the first 3 pages and I want to get into the Coram books.
Yeah. Well, we'll do that. Once we've got those out of the way, we'll do Knight of Swords, I think.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and then we'll only really have to do the Eternal Champion, and then we've covered the big 4. Well, actually, not the big 5, because I'm now doing Jerry Cornelius with Hussein.
So, exactly.
we're making progress. Yeah. We're making progress. All right, dude. Thanks very much. Thanks once again are due to Loz for his excellent support and his excellent insights and his third go as guest on Breakfast in the Ruins. And thanks also, as ever, to our patrons, Fred, Norman, Malpertius, David, Matt and Tom. Really appreciate it, guys. Thanks ever so much for chipping in. But also some additional thanks to, once again, the Twitter crowd have been absolutely fabulous with some of their feedback, but particularly to Tom Murphy and Yestin Pettigrew, who tipped me off a while back that they'd posted links to the podcast in the Michael Moorcock fan group, Multiversal Redoubt, and indicated that not only does Michael Moorcock post in there, as fittingly Jeremiah Cornelius, but also that he'd listened to the podcast and enjoyed it, and even wished happy birthday to Phil. And I must say, when I pointed that out to Phil and let her know, she was so happy and overwhelmed she had a little cry. So thanks, Yestin. Thanks, Tom. And also thanks and gratitude to Moorcock for being so gracious to actually not only listen, but to offer us some positive feedback. That's absolutely fantastic. As usual, recording with Natasha has thrown us for a loop due to dogs and booze. So as a result, whilst this episode was recorded after the Duel in the Skull Part 2, once again, it's coming out before, while we resolve some of those sound issues. And again, my friend Neil is providing me with excellent support in his spare time to actually solve some of these issues. So thanks again, Neil, not only for that, but also for sitting down with me and showing me a few bits and pieces about Audition. Now, my old mucker, Johnny Royale, got me a copy of Audition some time back, but it's a little bit too complicated for a novice such as me, but I am just starting to figure it out. And for the first time, this episode has been constructed in Audition rather than GarageBand. So I guess it will be for you listeners to decide whether there's a bump in quality, but, either way, let me know. I'd be interested to find out. So, in a couple of weeks' time, we hope to have the Duel in the Skull Part 2 published. And on top of that, another guest. He and I have been dancing around this for quite a while. He's recorded a couple of little extracts, but we still haven't managed to hook up and record remotely, which is something I'm still looking at figuring out. So, thanks again, everybody, for listening. And, I'll see you next time. But in the meantime, on the Moonbeam Roads.